All right, welcome back to episode 3 of the Frisky Risky podcast, where we talk all sports, football, basketball, hockey, golf, and all about gambling. We got Willie P, co-host of the Frisky Risky podcast, with us today. Willie P, how we doing?
I'm doing well. I'm at a weird place in my life right now because I woke up feeling a little sick, a little scratchy throat. Nothing crazy.
Oh,
But then I
no.
was thinking I got to go to my other job tomorrow, and I was like, what a great time for me to get sick and call out of work. First day of the tournament. You better stay. Whenever you're sick, everyone's like, lay down. Don't do much. Just rest, drink water. What a better way to do that than watching 16 college basketball games in one day, all 15 minutes apart.
Dude.
So if my boss is watching this or watches this later, I'm not calling out because it's March Madness. I'm calling out because I'm actually ill and I need to get rest. So
It just happens to
it's
coincide with the greatest tournament, of the
it's
year.
it's
I don't
it's like
know.
men. It's like I forget what the number is, but I think this week is the week that most men get vasectomies in the country, just because it's like you're laid up for a week or whatever, and everybody's like, let's just do it now for the same reason, so they can just watch basketball all week, and it's brilliant. It's amazing what the what the male mind will do when a bunch of basketball games are on. They'll do anything, and I love it.
Anything to watch sports,
I
man.
live
Anything
for
to
it. I
watch
love it. It's
sports.
the best time of the year. I've been sleeping well, but not that well, and I think it's just because I've been worried about my bracket, and we're gonna get into it today. But it's gonna be a wild tournament for sure.
That is true. We are going to get into it today. Normally, we go through a lot of stuff on this podcast. We get Willie P's NBA gambling picks. We talk football. We talk a little bit of everything. But today's episode is going to be essentially strictly March Madness. We are going to go through region by region, talk about some exciting games to watch, maybe some potential upsets, some players to watch, things like that. I know Will has a ton of data on a lot of this, so it will be a great episode. If you do want his NBA picks, continue, of course, to go to our social media. He'll keep putting them up there. We will have them on our newsletter, some special ones there, which will come out later today. So sign up for that newsletter. But let's jump into March Madness, man. Last week we talked a little bit about it, but this week we know who's playing who. We know how the regions are set up. So, Will, let's just jump right in. I think we just start with the East region. Give us a couple of games that you're really looking at in this
Well,
region.
obviously the spotlight is on this region mainly because the one seed and the number one seed overall and the defending champion UConn Huskies are in this region. They highlight this region. They're going to play. They play the winner of. Excuse me. No, I think they're playing.
They play
That's
Stetson.
who they play. Sorry, I thought they were playing Wagner for a second, who
Yeah.
got their first career tournament win last night, which is good for Wagner. But anyway, they play Stetson. They're a one seed. If UConn lost as a one seed, especially the number one overall one seed in the tournament, in the first day of the tournament, I think Dan Hurley would implode and take the whole team with him, because that dude, again,
I would implode.
I would implode as well. I'm thankfully this year I have a very good vested interest in two teams in Iowa State and UConn, just purely because half my family went to Iowa State and a lot of the other half on my mom's side went to UConn. So whenever UConn's good, I can kind of hop on that bandwagon, which is awesome. Even though I hate
This
bandwagoners.
is this is great to hear. This is great to hear, Will, because normally we're
I know,
opposing, with the
I know,
Celtics and
I
Denver.
know.
But my mom went to UConn, and I'm from
Yeah.
Connecticut, and so my family's big UConn
Oh yeah.
fans.
Well,
So I like to be on the same wavelength
I
as you.
hate this. Everybody. I do too, and I hate that. There's been a big narrative around UConn and, they're not going to repeat. Nobody's repeated since Florida back in, I think it was 08, 09 with Joe Kim Noah and all that. They were a wagon. And it was actually, that was the year that when they repeated, I think that was also the year they had Tebow, and they went back to back in football as well. They were just a powerhouse for college sports. But UConn will roll Stetson. They have an interesting group. In their group, they have Iowa State as the 2 seed, so potentially they could meet Iowa State in the Elite Eight, which would be hell of a matchup. And a lot of people are saying Iowa State could hang around with UConn and potentially upset them, even though they're a 2 seed. But I think that could be a great matchup down the road. But looking more into this region, the big game that I'm really highlighting to start is that 8-9 versus FAU and Northwestern. FAU obviously had a great
Yeah.
run last year. They went to the Final Four. Nobody had ever really heard of them. I'd only ever heard of them from playing college football 14, and I was like, oh, I didn't even know this school had a basketball team. And now they've turned into a pretty prolific program in this short 2 years, and they're getting a lot of big recruits. And Northwestern coming out of the Big Ten, they've had a good year. They beat a lot of good schools. They beat Purdue earlier in the year. Um, the big thing with Purdue is with Northwestern is they're missing a key guy. Um, at guard, and I think that to injury, and that might stagnate them a little bit. But we'll see. The stat with 9 seeds that ESPN Tournament Challenge has been giving out this year has been very interesting because they have. But between every matchup, they're showing a lot of trends from the past couple of years of the tournament, and supposedly nine
Hmm.
seeds have won the last 13 out of 20 meetings in the last 5 tournaments between 8 and 9 seeds. So for some reason, the 8-9 is a big upset watch, and I do like Northwestern over FAU, even though they have that key injury. They just the Big Ten plays better basketball, in my opinion. And when I get down to tough picks like this, especially early in the tournament, I tend to lean more towards what conference they're in. It can be the bane of my existence, but also Northwestern's beaten a lot of good teams this year, and they've hung around a lot. They didn't have the best Big Ten tournament, but they are playing good basketball, and I think they're trending in the right direction. So I'm going to take Northwestern in that matchup. Another big one is the 7 seed Washington State against Drake. Drake is the 10 seed. Drake is a solid team. They have been for the last 4 years. They've been a wagon. They have this kid named Tucker DeVries. He averages almost 22 points a game. The dude's just a pure hooper, and he's a senior. He's been with
Yep.
that team for a while. That team also has a very old and experienced backcourt that I think is really going to help them. Drake does like to push the pace as well, and they're pretty good at not turning the ball over, which is a great recipe, especially in March. And so I like that matchup a lot. I wouldn't be surprised to see Drake upset Washington State, even though Washington State had a good run in the in the Pac-12 tournament. They ended up losing to CU, who's playing tonight against Boise State, which will be another big game in the other first four. But yeah, that Washington State Drake matchup is going to be a big matchup in that East region. And the big thing that could slow down Drake and their offensive efficiency is Wazoo has had a top 30 defense all year. They live and die by their defense. They're not the best shooting team, but their defense is strong enough to stifle good offenses. And, they're D1 college players. They can still score the rock when they need to. So that's going to be a really close game. I wouldn't be surprised if that comes down to a buzzer beater or potentially, a, a free throw shooting contest in that region for sure. So I wouldn't be surprised to see UConn win that region and come out of it and go to the Final Four. But UConn does kind of have a not the easiest way to get to the Final Four. Like I said earlier, if all the stars align, they'd have to meet number 2 seed Iowa State in the Elite Eight. But before that, if Auburn plays well, who's the 4 seed in that region, they will have to meet Auburn in the Sweet 16, which is another key matchup for the UConn Huskies. So even though they are the number one overall seed in the tournament, they do not have the easiest path to the Final Four, which is interesting to see.
Yeah. To follow up on a few of those, I love that you bring up the Wash State Drake game because I actually have in my bracket Drake
Me
beating
too.
Washington State. I think that is a that Tucker DeVry, he's the best player on that court. So if he can take over that game, then I think Drake should be able to move past them. Um, FAU Northwestern, another good game, like you said. I mean, that's pretty evenly matched. Honestly, it's a coin
Yeah.
flip to me at this point. Both defenses struggle, so interested to see how they hold up against each other. It will be, I think, a little bit more higher scoring, and some may think, but it will be interesting to see who makes it on. Right now, I have actually FAU moving past Northwestern, but just because their strength of schedule was a little bit better,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean that Northwestern definitely could easily beat them as well. And my bracket, just so we all know, is not set, so I am still tinkering with it, which is probably the worst thing I could do, but still doing that. UConn Auburn, I actually do have them meeting up. I do have UConn beating them. As an Alabama fan, it's just too hard
Yeah.
to put Auburn far enough. Uh, but I do have UConn beating them. But I do feel that is going to be a tough matchup if they get to that point. And to be honest with you, Iowa State, Illinois, I think would be a good game.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I don't I know you in our last episode you talked Iowa State and you called them out right from the beginning, but Illinois has a strong team and I think it might be tough for Iowa State to move past them. So it will be very that'll be a fun game to watch if we can get to that point.
Iowa State has a their small forward Milan Milokovic or some. Again, I'm terrible at these Eastern European names, and I love to butcher them. But his first name's Milan. But he in the Big 12 championship just went absolutely berserk. I think he shot over 75% from the field, and he shot like 5 for 8 from three or something ridiculous. He was just going berserk. And my big thing, especially if they get to Illinois, which they will, if Iowa State can shoot the ball well, they're a very hard team to beat. But when they go cold and they are struggling to shoot from the perimeter and get their offense going, they've shown a lot of weakness for sure. So we'll see. And Illinois is a classic team. They have great guard play. My roommate and I were talking about it last night, and that's what wins this tournament is great guard play. That's what this tournament is designed for. If you have guards that can score, push the pace, control the offense, don't turn the ball over, you are going to have tournament success. And I could definitely see Illinois and their backcourt doing that, given the experience that they have in that backcourt for sure.
Yeah, I always worry about teams that shoot the three so well because it just doesn't seem to roll over to March
Mhm.
Madness as well. They usually go on a run if they get hot early, but then at some point they go cold. And so it's hard for me to pick teams like that to go all the way through just because I just feel like at some point it's not going to work and they need to have something. Now, I'm not saying Iowa State doesn't have other ways to shoot.
Mhm.
They're not really one of those strictly only 3-point teams that make their way through, but there are some teams like that, and those always worry me
Totally.
because I just feel like you need another way to get the ball in the basket there, or you're not going to
Well, and
make
the
it.
big thing with piggybacking off of that is you got to be able to get teams in foul trouble. And if you're shooting from the perimeter majority of the game, you're not going to be doing that. So, again, like you
Yeah.
said, if you're hitting threes and you're hitting shots, it looks great and you look potent. But the moment you start missing those shots and you don't have any other options to go inside or even play a high pick and roll game, then you're very limited. So we'll see. Everybody loves shooting threes in the NBA, but that's the NBA. This isn't March Madness. So, especially when you're one and done, you got to make your shots. And if you're not making them, it could be a long day and it could be a long ride back to wherever home is for you, especially if you're playing in this East region. So we'll see what happens. But
That's
moving into the,
that is for
yeah,
sure. Well, going down to the West region, North Carolina is our one seed. We had a play-in game last night. Give us your thoughts there, bud.
I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I was a little surprised when when North Carolina got the one seed. I really, really thought, and this is my bias, especially after watching that Big 12 championship, I really thought they were going to give it to Iowa State after they dismantled Houston by 30 plus. But UNC has been a wagon all year. They beat Duke, in my opinion, a somewhat pedestrian Duke team. This is not a Duke team that we're used to seeing, and Coach Shire he's got to be on the hot seat a little bit, I think, especially after taking the reins from Coach K 2 years ago, and they just haven't had the immediate success that a lot I think would have, especially since he was in that program for a long time under Krzyzewski. Filipowski obviously is a solid player for Duke, but UNC beat the crap out of him in UNC in Chapel Hill this year and in Duke as well. So I'm not surprised. They have arguably the best player in the country in RJ Davis. He's arguably the best point guard as well as the best player. I think Edey on Purdue is going to get AP Player of the Year because he is a monster. But RJ Davis is the pride and joy of that offense and that team. He runs that team. Same with Armando Bacot. They have a lot of senior leadership that I think is really key for them. And I did see a stat this morning that I was telling you before the show that UNC has won 5 national championships in their program career. Every time they've won it, they've been a 1 seed. So I think that's why a lot of people have I keep saying UNC going to the Final Four because of, again, another big trend. And they seem to play really well when they get the 1 seed. And, they're gonna roll through their first game and moving in more into that region. It seems like, the next big game that they got to play after that is the winner of Michigan State, Mississippi State, which is a game I'm going to be looking at a lot. Michigan State has kind of had an up and down year. I really didn't think they were going to make the tournament just based off their play, but they snuck in and Coach Tom Izzo is Mr. March. That dude. I don't know how he does it with the players he does. He finds a way to win. And Mississippi State's a good team. They beat Kentucky early in the SEC tournament, but I just have a hard time betting and picking against Tom Izzo and Michigan State. So I think Michigan State is going to win that first round matchup against Mississippi State as the 9 seed, and they're going to be playing UNC. And I have no doubt that UNC will probably roll Michigan State in the second round, but it'll be interesting to see that matchup for sure. Another big one that I like is the 11 New Mexico against the 6 Clemson. Kind of surprised Clemson got such a high seed. I didn't really pay a lot of attention to Clemson this year, mostly because they're more known for their football, obviously. But I have watched a lot of New Mexico this year, being in Fort Collins, Colorado, which is Colorado State in the Mountain West. And New Mexico is coached by Rick Pitino's son. That team is a wagon. They have great guard play, phenomenal guard play, and I would not be surprised to see a big first round upset in New Mexico beating Clemson for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree on both of those. And actually, if you were to see my bracket right now, you would probably laugh because I have Michigan State beating Mississippi State, and I also have New Mexico beating Clemson. So, um, I think probably both of us, because we do a lot of research on it, end up with some of these same picks. But I love both of those for the same reasons. I am a little bit worried about North Carolina. I also did not feel that they were a 1 seed, and I'm not sure that they're going to make it to the Final Four. I think they have actually a pretty tough path depending on how teams play. Of course, as an Alabama alum, I'm rooting for them, and it's the same region here. But Alabama's got the number 1 scoring in terms of points per game, and I think they have a chance if they're hot and they get that hot hand to move on. They have been streaky
Mm-hmm.
for sure, so definitely could play to a disadvantage there. And we'll see how that plays out. I also think Arizona is a stacked team. They're a hot team. They haven't really played to their potential in some of the past tournaments as much as we would have liked to see. But this could finally be their year. And I actually have them moving on to my Final Four against UConn.
I have them in the Final Four as well. They have Caleb Love in one of the, again, besides RJ Davis, one of the best guards in the country. He has led that team. I think he averages close to 20 points a game. He has just been a wagon all year. He is the heart and soul of that offense. He runs that team. And that's kind of the big thing for me with Arizona is, they play a 15 seed in Long Beach State, and the cool thing with Long Beach State is they mutually agreed to part ways with their coach. So they fired their coach before their conference tournament, and then Long Beach State, of course, ended up making a run and won their conference tournament are now in the big dance. So that's a cool storyline to see. I think their run is going to end pretty quickly, but it is a feel good story, and honestly pretty funny that, of course, I'm sure the Long Beach State athletic director is now kicking himself because he's like, why did I fire this guy and now it seems
Yeah.
that locker room is really rally around that coach and they're playing for that guy. So, and the interesting thing about this region too is if UConn and Arizona make it through their region, they will meet each other in the Elite Eight to go to the Final Four. And Caleb Love, the best player, like I said, on Arizona, used to play for UConn. You just gotta keep doing it for North
They'll
Carolina.
they'll meet each other. Oh, North
Sorry,
Carolina.
yes.
Okay, I was like, you kind
I
of meet him
keep
in the Final
UConn and
Four.
UNC, and I keep saying UConn when I mean North Carolina, so I'm just going to say the Tar Heels from now on. They could meet the Tar Heels in the Elite Eight, which would be a heck of a storyline
Yep.
given that Caleb Love was on this Tar Heel team the past 2 years prior to this year, and 2 years ago made the national championship with them. So it could be that if that game happens, which I think it will, that's going to be an absolute dogfight, and it could go either way for me. But I could see if Caleb Love gets hot, it's gonna be wraps for a lot of teams. I think if that guy can find his shot early and consistent, he's a force to be reckoned with, and that Arizona team complements his game very very well. So Yeah,
Yeah,
and another big game for me
that
in
would
that
be a
region
good
is
storyline.
another Mountain West team in Nevada playing Dayton. Dayton's had a pretty up and down year. They're solid. They normally make the tournament every year. They're a solid program for sure. But I've watched a lot of the Mountain West this year, and I feel really good about the Mountain West this year. Nevada's solid. They have great guard play. They play great defense, and they have this guy named George Lucas who just shoots the ball like you've never seen. I was actually at the Nevada Colorado State game earlier this year in Fort Collins, and he missed 4 straight free throws to allow Colorado State to tie it up. Colorado State ties it up with 2.5 seconds left, and he had a buzzer beater half court three to send the Rams home packing in their own stadium. So it's Nevada's a team to watch for sure. I don't think they'll go crazy deep in the tournament, but I could see them at least moving on to maybe the Sweet 16. If they beat Dayton, they have a tough matchup and what will most likely be Arizona. So again, maybe they don't make the Sweet 16. They'd have to play the game of their lives to beat Arizona, but I could see them at least getting out of the first round for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I have Dayton winning that game over Nevada, but like you said, it's a toss up.
Yeah.
I think either team could take that. As we head over to the South region, Will, this is headed up by Houston, who I think everyone has pretty high up on their boards despite their Big 12
Mhm.
loss. Houston has played well all year. I think they had 30 wins, right? So one of the few teams who were able to rack up 30 wins this season. They're playing Longwood. That should be a blowout if the Houston that everyone knows shows up. I know a lot of people, including myself, has Houston in their Final
Me too.
Four. So they have a squad for sure. As we look down that region, though, there's a lot of good games. I think in this region, you got this could be a big 12-5 upset region with James Madison over
Everybody
Wisconsin.
loves the Dukes.
Texas,
They
yeah,
love the Dukes.
Texas A&M Texas A&M,
Mhm.
Nebraska is a tough game for both of those teams, and then you have NC State playing Texas Tech,
Mhm.
which could be a good game. The way NC State's been
Mhm.
playing, you wonder if coming off the high that they are, if they kind of crumble or if they're able to keep that momentum. But and then Florida and against whoever wins tonight in this Boise Colorado game, Florida has that injury, fractured leg to their big man. So there's some injury issues there for them. Could they potentially get upset? So give us your thoughts.
Well, to go back to Houston, Houston's obviously a wagon. They have the second best odds to win the national championship if you bet it before the tournament at plus 550. Obviously, UConn is the favorite at plus 370. I like the value at plus 550, and if you got them actually a week ago, they were even higher. It was like plus 700 before the conference tournaments, but I do like Houston. I did see a funny little tidbit. I don't know where these people on Reddit find these weird trends, but I don't know if you saw it. But in the last 3 years, uh, I guess every tournament since 2021, a top two seed has lost in the first round to a team that has, sounds so silly to say, but some sort of phallus reference in their name. Oral Roberts, St. Peter's, now we have Longwood. So if anybody's going to upset the one seed in Houston, it might be Longwood purely because of their name, which I know sounds ridiculous, but again, people do these crazy
Big
research.
trend
It
guy.
trends.
Big
I'm
trend
not
guy.
saying I'm picking the 16 over the one, but I would not be surprised. I would be surprised, but I would not be shocked if Longwood somehow played the game of their lives and kept this insane trend going in a tournament.
If it happens, you heard it here. I want to say first, maybe second if you're on Reddit, but if it happens, you heard it here
I
first
would.
from Willie
My,
P.
I don't even know what I mean. That would be arguably probably the biggest bracket buster of all time. That would be absurd. But another, yeah,
I would think so.
but
Yeah.
moving into that JMU Wisconsin game, I've been rattling my brain with that matchup. The Dukes, I think, have also won 30 or 31 games this year. They were a wagon all year. They beat some big teams. They beat Michigan State the first game of the season. Granted, that was months ago, but they came onto the scene and they showed everyone that they meant business. And they play well. They also seem to tend to play a little fast, which is interesting. Um, especially because Wisconsin is a classic Big Ten team. They shoot the three ball well, and they have a big inside presence. So that one, honestly, and of course it's a classic 12-5, and that is what everybody says: a 12 always beats a five. So
Yeah.
that one, honestly, for me has been a coin flip. I've been going back and forth, and Wisconsin honestly has been very hot. They played well, and they upset Purdue in the Big Ten conference semis. So they're getting hot at the right time. So for me, I want to take the 12 in JMU, and a lot of people like them. But for some reason, I'm kind of leaning towards the Badgers purely just because of the competition that they play and just more of the style that they play. I'm worried that JMU is going to kind of hit a roadblock with some solid Big Ten defense and might not be able to find a way out of it. But that game for me it might just come down to me flipping a coin. In all honesty, it's
Yeah, looking at the stats there, I think they have Wisconsin as a strength of schedule 4th and JMU
yeah.
325th.
So
So to your point, the caliber of who they have played is not really the same.
it's not. Well, but then you think about last year with Furman beating Virginia and Princeton beating Arizona. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about March, right? Is we can crunch as many numbers as we want all day. We can look at trends, whatever. And at the end of the day, it's basketball, and anything can happen. Especially with these teams that like JMU, that I think this is their first tournament appearance in either a while or ever. But they have nothing to lose in a sense, and you know, we'll see. I mean, and moving into that, another big 12-5 that I like is actually it might not be a 12-5, but it's the McNeese State Gonzaga game.
Gonzaga,
I've seen
yeah.
a lot of quote unquote bracket experts picking McNeese State. I guess they've won 30. So I think they've won 31 games as well this year. They've been a powerhouse in their conference.
They're 30 and 3
Yeah.
on the
So
season.
they've had another great year, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe last year they hired a new coach, and in his introductory press conference that year, McNeese State had lost 23 games, and he said we are going to win 23 plus games next year, and obviously rang true. So obviously that locker room is rallied around that system and that coach, and Gonzaga's Gonzaga. They've been here before. They've made a lot of tournament runs. They obviously have never won a national championship. I don't think they're going to do it again this year. They don't have that Drew Timmy type player, a really standalone player on their roster to really carry them. But maybe that's what they need this year. Maybe they need more of a team mentality rather than just feed their star players and rely on them. So I don't know, but we'll see. That's going to be another tight game.
That's
I wouldn't be surprised to see Gonzaga maybe pull away and kind of break some people's hearts. But that's the beauty of this tournament.
Yeah, and that's a tough and we're going to get into the Midwest here in a minute, but that's a tough you know, choosing that game, especially because the Sanford Kansas game
Oh,
and then the Gonzaga McNeese winner plays the Sanford Kansas winner. And so if you choose wrong, part of your bracket may be busted for a while
100%
because
won.
there are some
Won
there's
yesterday.
some hard ones. It's not like, hey, it's one loss and then they're out too. This is one that could go on for a while.
100%, and that Sanford, Kansas is the last one in this Midwest region that I really am keeping my eye on, purely because Kevin McCullough yesterday they released that he is not going to play this tournament. He is their leading scorer by zero point 0.3 of a point. Dickinson is their second leading scorer at 18 points a game, and he will be playing. But not having McCullough is going to be big for Kansas. They've also been playing pretty poor basketball as of late. I think they've lost their last 4 out of 5 or 3 out of 5 or something like that. Their numbers are not trending in the right direction. That being said, Bill Self is a great tournament coach. He obviously won it 2 years ago, so I wouldn't I wouldn't be surprised to see Kansas sneak away with this win. But I do not think Samford is going to go down lightly, and I think it's going to be a pretty close nail biter game for sure, especially without McCullough, lighting it up from beyond the arc.
Yeah, and they also have Dickinson injured as well. He's playing. I think they said he has been practicing. I think he had the dislocated shoulder, if I'm
Yeah,
correct.
yeah,
Right? Was that
hmm
correct? Because McCullough had the knee,
hmm
the bone
hmm
bruise. So you can, here's the thing with that, right? So he comes in and plays. That's great. if he tries to reach in for a steal, if he goes up for a block, if that shoulder gets twisted in a way, or I shouldn't say twisted, but pulled back in a way, um, that could be it
Mhm,
for
mhm.
him as well,
And he's
right?
an NBA
So it only
prospect,
takes
so
one play. Yeah, and it only takes one play to sublux or dislocate that shoulder if it's true instability. And I don't know how many instability events he's had.
mhm,
If this is his first, and he's maybe okay or whatever it may be. But if this is something that he's had chronically, or he's had him before, and maybe they haven't even talked about him, he's just had him in a practice and they popped it back in, or whatever it may be. Um, it could be a bigger problem than we
100.
know. So, that's something else to look at. So even if they make it past Sanford, I think they're going to have a hard time going beyond that. So if McNeese can beat Gonzaga, or if Gonzaga beats McNeese, either way, they may have an easier matchup depending on, just based on injuries and what Kansas is going through right now.
100%.
So that'll be something to watch. But before we get back to the Midwest, let's finish up on the
Oh, God.
South. On the South, no, no, all good, man. I love talking about it all.
Yeah.
I'll go
I didn't
all
realize I
around.
was I
um,
didn't mean
but
to.
back to the South region with Houston. Um, any thoughts on either the Florida or the play-in game, of who Florida's gonna be facing, the Boise State or
So this
Colorado?
is the interesting thing with this matchup is obviously they still have to play tonight to see who Florida will be playing on Friday. But I think it's in the last 3 or 4 tournaments straight. A team that won that was in the first four and made it out of the first four has made it to the Sweet 16. So, and that happened I think 3 years ago with UCLA. They made it to the Final Four with Juzang and um, Tiger. I forget his last name, but they had a great run and they were a first four team in. So it seems like these teams that like Boise State or Colorado, if they win tonight, they have momentum going in, and I get that because they've already played a game. They've kind of already felt that tournament atmosphere. Granted, it's in Dayton, so it's much smaller, but I would not be surprised to see either one of these teams in Boise State or Colorado, if when they win tonight, if they do go in and upset Florida in the first round, purely because Florida's been sitting longer and these guys have already kind of gotten familiar with their game again after having about a week off. So, we'll see. I mean, I would love to see Florida show up. They kind of got rolled in the SEC tournament, and I kind of am surprised that
Yeah,
they got a 7 seed, but they have played good ball. They're a strong team, and but I do think Boise State is one of those teams. They have a lot of senior leadership in their backcourt, and they shoot the three ball very well. So if you catch Boise State on a bad day where they're shooting at a good consistency from behind the arc, Florida's going to have a tough time defending that for sure. So, and same thing with Colorado. Colorado's got a very senior backcourt as well, a senior starting five, and they have a top 10 lottery pick in Cody Williams at forward, who's been phenomenal for them all year. KJ Simpson, their point guard, is a rock. He reminds me a lot of like a Damian Lillard type, just runs the offense, shoots the ball well, doesn't turn it over a lot. So Florida's gonna have their hands full for whoever they play out of that first four game. They're honestly probably praying that it's a just a grind defensive fest. They get tired. Maybe you never wish for injuries, but maybe someone gets banged up or whatever. So yeah, I mean Florida should be pretty puckered right now. I mean I'm sure they're happy to make the tournament and at a pretty decent seed, but I'm sure once they saw that they had to play a play-in team, they were like, oh shit. So we'll see. That game is going to be. I'm excited for that Boise State Colorado game tonight. Everybody should be watching that game. It's going to be a great game. So, and it could be a big dictator of how this whole region shakes out. Because I would not be surprised if one of those teams, kind of bust brackets and makes like we've seen in the past couple of years, make a little bit of a run that nobody was expecting. So,
yeah. I actually have, and obviously since the game isn't until tonight, no one knows who it's going to be. But I actually have whoever
me
getting
too.
in beating Florida, which is why I
Yeah.
asked. I do think they'll lose to Marquette. I
Ooh.
like Marquette, but like you said, who knows? They could go on. They could bust the bracket a little bit. But I like Marquette as a team. Before we're going to move to the Midwest here in a second, but before we do, I have one final question for you in the South. Um, my wife is a Catamount
Oh,
alumni,
sure.
the Vermont, the UVM Catamounts. Obviously, I think Duke will beat the Catamounts, as does she. However, I know that you feel that Duke is quite fraudulent this year as a squad. Do you think UVM has any chance to beat Duke, or do you think Duke moves on? And how far do you see Duke moving on, if so?
Well, let me just take a look at my bracket. But I do think the Catamounts in Vermont have a great chance to beat Duke. Like I said, Duke is trending in the wrong direction. Filipowski is a solid player. He'll be an NBA prospect. He is an NBA prospect. He should be a top 10 pick. He's a phenomenal big man. But Duke doesn't have the, excuse me, the it factor that we've seen in years past. And I just don't think Filipowski has the offensive capability and the defensive capability on both ends of the floor to really dictate that game. And I was talking to you a little bit about last night, but one thing that I'm going to be keeping my eye on, especially for the early rounds of this tournament, and what I'm going to be betting on is first half underdog money lines. Meaning, I don't, I necessarily maybe don't think Vermont is going to win the game at the end of the game, but I would not be surprised if Vermont went into halftime with a 2, 3, 4 point lead, and everyone's kind of looking around like, oh, Duke's, what's going on with Duke, So at least I've seen it a lot in all the tournaments that I watch. It seems like especially these first two rounds, these big underdogs definitely like to show up and show everyone in the country why they're in the tournament. That doesn't necessarily translate to the full game, but I would not be surprised to see Vermont potentially be leading Duke at halftime. So I don't know what the odds are for that right now. I haven't really looked at them, but I would definitely keep an eye on those, especially again with like this JMU Wisconsin, same thing. I could see them leading in halftime and then maybe Wisconsin adjusting and getting back into it and then, taking over the game and ultimately winning the game at the end of the game. But yeah, I mean, Vermont, they made the tournament last year as well, I believe. They've kind of turned into a little bit of a pretty solid program up there in the Northeast. And, I've heard a lot of people talk about it. And again, I pick Vermont. I don't believe in Duke. I will believe it when I see it. And if they're going to be the ones to bust my bracket on day one,
Ooh,
I can live with that and sleep comfortable. But I am not bought in on Duke.
went with
I,
Vermont.
I, I feel good about the Catamounts. And we've seen, it's a 13-4. We saw it last year. It might happen again. I believe in the Catamounts. They shoot it. They shoot the ball well when they're on, and they also play pretty solid defense. So I would not be surprised to see Filipowski getting doubled in the post pretty early and making those other players on that perimeter shoot the ball, because that's going to be the way you're going to beat him. If Filipowski can get inside and do what he does best, it's going to be a long night for the Catamounts. But if they get the ball out of his hands and make him pass and make him rely on his other teammates, the Catamounts should have a very, very good shot to win that game for sure.
All right. I like to hear it. I like to hear it. You heard it here. Duke out first round. Willie P says so. Um, all right. Moving down to the Midwest, Will, we have Purdue leading it off. So obviously everyone knows what happened last year. Purdue has been a little fraudulent as well when it comes to March Madness. Edie, obviously, fantastic player. However, if he's not on, he seems to be kind of their team.
Mm-hmm.
If he's not on, they basically have no chance to win it. It would seem. He also gets a few calls that are
Oh man. Oh man.
a little bit odd sometimes. Some calls that you wonder maybe should go against him or going for him. But that's neither here nor there. What are your thoughts with Purdue? Are they going to have another big issue in the clutch, or are they going to be able to actually carry on this year? Because I saw a lot of expert picks who have them winning the whole tournament this
I
year, and
know.
I'm a little bit nervous to bring them that far.
I am as well, especially because of recency bias, and I think that's where everyone is at with them. The last 2 years have lost to a 2 seed in the first round and a 1 seed. So I don't. The trends, as I love to say, don't align towards them making a deep run, but they do. A lot of people have said, and I agree with it, they do look a lot better than they have in years past. Again, like you said, Edie, when he's on, he's on. He's the best player in the country. But when he's not, they seem to lose their offensive identity a little bit. And the interesting thing, too, is who they will be playing is the winner of tonight's other first four game in Grambling State and my alumni, Montana State, who has made the tournament at an even 17-17 after doing a deep run in the Big Sky tournament and winning it all. And the funny thing too is the Bobcats are a 5-point favorite coming into tonight. We'll see how the line moves throughout the day, but I don't even if the Bob if any of these teams between Grambling State and Montana State win, Purdue will have a cakewalk with them. I would be shocked, but it would be a beautiful story to tell if my alumni was the third team in a row to upset Purdue in the first round. I think I would probably get that tattooed somewhere on my body. I'm not even kidding you because that would just
I think the only sad part about that would be the bigger story would be that Purdue lost
oh
again in March Madness, as opposed to the story being
oh
Montana State
everybody would
or
be yeah.
Grambling beat them. That would be the only caveat that would kind of suck. But if it is Montana State comes in and they beat Purdue, we are gonna have so much fun on this
Oh, it's gonna
podcast
be I'll be
when
crying
the
like a
next
little
one
kid. And I'm I'm not telling anyone to do this. No advisory position here, but I will be sprinkling money on Montana State money line just because I'm sure the odds will be ridiculous, and it will probably only be like $5. But if that one chance it happens, I might be making some money. And God, Purdue needs to. I'm curious to see what's going on in the days before the tournament because they got to know that this monkey's on their back and it's hanging over them. And again, Edie's again going to be the AP Player of the Year, but dude can't get it done in the clutch, and that's going to be a big thing, especially affecting his draft stock. I don't think Edie will be that good of an NBA player personally, unless he puts on another 50 pounds of muscle. But that's here nor there. We're talking March Madness, but yeah, I mean Purdue is they're solid when they're solid, like any team. But they make me the most worried. I do have them going pretty far, just because they do have the easiest road to the Final Four, and of course they do, because I'm sure the turn or the
You have them in your Final
I
Four?
don't have them in my final. I don't believe I do. No, I do not. My
Me
right
neither.
now,
I have them in the Elite 8.
I have them in the Elite Eight. My Final Four tentatively at the
Yep.
moment is Iowa State, North Carolina, Houston, Tennessee. We'll see, but according to experts, Purdue does have
Wait, say that again? Say
Iowa
that again?
State playing UNC and then Houston playing Tennessee.
Oh, you have Iowa State beating UConn.
I do. And I don't know how I feel about it.
Interesting,
And that's why I'm
interesting,
like,
okay.
this is very tentative
Interesting.
because I'm like, ha ha, but well, it's going to be,
I,
I don't know.
in the Midwest region, I actually have Creighton beating Purdue. That's how I have Creighton in my Final Four.
I
So
I I like Creighton a lot. I do. I have
we're gonna see what happens. I'm a little bit nervous about it. That's my most nerve-wracking one, I think. But I like the way that they've been playing. I like their identity as a team. They've had their struggles, but I think they can do it. They have their way up there. Tennessee, they have to go through Tennessee. Tennessee's been streaky though as well, especially in the later half in the tournament. So we're gonna see. We're gonna see. I also would like to ask you about the 11-6 in that region, Oregon, South Carolina. Get your
mm,
thoughts on that. I actually have Oregon riding out some momentum in actually beating South Carolina, but what are your
I'm
thoughts
in the
on that
same
game?
boat as you. I like Oregon. This is they won their first Pac-12 championship since 2019 this year. They beat Colorado, unfortunately, but they looked very good. And Colorado was a hot team in that Pac-12 tournament. I thought they were going to go all the way, especially with their big man Eddie Lampkin playing the way he was. But Oregon is a solid team, and they have tournament experience. At least their program, not necessarily their whole starting lineup, but they do have a pretty older lineup, which I think will help them. South Carolina's been good this year, but I can't get over. I can't get myself to pick the Gamecocks over the Ducks for some reason, and I do like you. I like the momentum that they're riding, and they're playing good basketball at the right time, and that's huge. So, um, yeah, I do like Oregon over South Carolina for sure.
Nice. So before I ask you my final question, I have one more, and that's your thoughts on the UVA game last night. Because I know your thoughts on the game, but I'd like you to explain um, how you felt about that playing game
Well, I
last
think the
night.
biggest storyline since the bracket has come out on Sunday evening is how much the committee has screwed up this bracket, especially with seeding and who they let in and who they gave out. And a big thing with that is I don't know. Well, first of all, let me say I was very pleased to see Colorado State show up and just put a whooping on Tony Bennett's Cavaliers. I don't. understand why Virginia got into the tournament. Granted, it was the first four, but even that game, you could have put Pitt in there. You could have put so many other teams in there that would have at least made that game a game. I mean, you put up 14 points in the first half. That's egregious. What are you, an AAU team in middle school? You know what I mean? And I was sitting there watching the game, of course, and a little blurb comes up above the scoreboard, and it says, last Virginia basket, 9:49 Eastern Standard Time. I look at my phone, it's 8:40 Mountain Time. And I look at my roommate and I go, they haven't scored a basket in over an hour of real time, not game time, real time. And I was like, what are we doing here? So Colorado State looks good. I wouldn't be surprised. I have them winning their next matchup actually against Texas, purely again because they're one of those first four teams, and they have been one of those teams that has fit into this golden trapezoid of this. You can look it up; it's kind of hard to explain, but it's all about offensive efficiency and turning the ball over. But they have fit in this criteria of solid offensive efficiency as well as defensive efficiency. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Colorado State, because of their big win, especially last night against a solid Power 5 school in Virginia, who has a record of being a good team in the tournament, just blowing the brakes off of them. I think Colorado State could make a run because of that. And again, I mean, and the big thing too that people, I don't know, have either not researched or not realized is that these conference tournaments we had last week were ridiculous. NC State winning 5 games in 5 days. That's one reason why the bubble just continued to shrink and shrink and shrink throughout that week last week. And because of the teams that did win, like Oregon and North Carolina State, that's why some of these teams that you thought would be in here are not. So, and that's kind of the beauty of March Madness is you just got to win games at the end of the day. You just got to win. And so Virginia couldn't do that. I'm glad they didn't win because, again, I also hate their pace of play, and they play old man's basketball, and I don't think Tony Bennett has ever pushed a rebound in transition to try and get an easy layup. He loves to just slow that thing down, and for some teams it works, but obviously for Virginia it did not, and I'm glad to see that they are not making any more moves in the tournament because that was just despicable to watch, and I think, the fact that the total points for that game was 122 and a half, so 123 points. It ended at 108. So anybody that took the under in that game, I applaud you because the numbers pregame did not suggest that would happen. So, we'll see. We'll see what Colorado State can do, but I'm glad Virginia's out. I personally think they should fire Tony Bennett. I think he's kind of he's run his course as their head coach. Granted, he's gotten them to 1 seeds, whatever, but also his resume in the past 5 to 6 tournaments hasn't been that solid. So given, they were the first 1 seed to ever lose to a 16, I think 4 or 5 years ago. So maybe the Tony Bennett era
then they
is
did
over.
The next year. They won the whole tournament
That's right. Year. They did. You're right. That's right. Well, and that's one. So that's also, I forgot about that. And I'm glad you mentioned that because a lot of people have been saying that about Purdue is, Purdue's lost in the first 2 rounds, the last 2 years. This is going to be the year they do it, like Virginia. And I'm like, So, and I think Kansas did the same thing actually 3 years ago too. They lost early and they won 2 years ago. So maybe this is what Purdue's needed.
Go in and change my bracket.
Yeah, I know. Well, and that's the worst thing is because I'm on social media all day, just whatever for what we do and just getting info and whatever. Also, just being a human being with an iPhone, and I'll see a new little weird trend or blurb, and I'm just like, oh man. I'm so bad at not just like being confident in my picks. And that's
just tinkering around.
And that's why I tell all my friends, like I made a big bracket group with a bunch of friends from college and whatever. And a lot of them are girls and they're like, I don't watch basketball. Why would I do this? I'm like, here's the deal. At the end of the day, like, yeah, I can kind of predict some, 1 versus 16s or 2 versus 15s. Like those are probably pretty easy to predict. But like at the end of the day, it's March Madness and it's easier to win the lottery than to pick a perfect bracket. So anybody's got a chance. Just fill out a bracket,
So to pick a perfect bracket, it's actually, I was reading an article about a guy who got the first, his last name was Nigel. He got the first 48 picks right a few years ago. And they said that's the equivalent of winning the Powerball twice.
Mm-hmm. There's one dude in the history of brackets that has picked a perfect bracket. I think it was in the late 60s, early 70s. And he picked a perfect bracket, but it was half the size of the field. So instead of 68,
Okay.
it was, whatever, 44 or something. It was much smaller, but he still did it, which is remarkable to do. So, you know, and if you do pick a perfect bracket, I don't know if he's still doing it. I believe Warren Buffett's still alive, but at least back in the day, he always offers up like $1 billion if someone picks a perfect bracket.
Warren
So
Warren Buffett is still
yeah,
alive.
thank God. Well, I don't know. Oh, that was Jimmy Buffett that died. Rest his poor soul. My God, I'm a dick. Um,
Oh god. Jesus. We you come here for the sports, not the financial and or music
yeah,
trivia.
fair enough.
So let me ask you this. Who is your final game and what is your score prediction?
As of now, I have UNC and Tennessee in the final game. My score prediction, let me just bring
Oh,
that out.
okay.
I really like Tennessee. Dalton Knecht is, God, that guy has such a nice shooting stroke. It's ridiculous. He's a great player. And like I said much earlier in the podcast, good guard play is key for this tournament. And that's how you win games. And that's what Tennessee has, especially in Dalton Knecht. That dude's averaging 22 points a game. He's just a monster when he's on. And lately, he's been on. So, yeah, in my final, let's see. I got North Carolina, Tennessee, and I did a total. For some reason, ESPN won't let you do like the final score. It's just total points now. But
Yeah, same as CBS is the
yeah,
same
I
way.
would.
I think a bunch of them just do
Yeah,
total.
well, I did 145 total points. So I don't know, somewhere, you know, 70, 75. I think it'll be close. I don't think it'll be like the final we saw last year in UConn and San Diego State, where UConn was obviously just the much better team and was just a full powerhouse. I think it'll be. I think this tournament's going to grind down a lot of these really good teams, especially the ones that make a deep run. And I hope it'll kind of turn into the final that we had. I think that was 5 years ago between Villanova and UNC, where it ended on two buzzer beaters to win that game. So that was. I
Yeah.
hope it will be something like that. Not saying I wasn't stoked to see UConn just roll everybody last year, but it is always better when the games are a little closer, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
more fun, especially in something like this. Unless it's your
yeah.
team, definitely more fun to watch a good game. Um, any other trends that you've been watching or power rankings or anything like that that people should know about? I know you've mentioned something about offensive and defensive
Mhm.
rankings and how that has trended to the winner. What do you got for us?
So I've been seeing a lot of things. This isn't. I did not find this. I've had other. I wish that I had the time and the resources to be able to just look at March Madness trends all the time, because I don't know how these guys do it, because they find the craziest stuff. But according to I think it's the last 10 plus tournaments, the team that has won the tournament has fallen into this 21-31 category, which is a top 21 average on the year of offensive efficiency and then a top 31 average of defensive efficiency over the whole season. And the seven teams that fit this criteria are Purdue, Houston, Arizona, and then Auburn, UConn, Marquette, and UNC. So, according to the trends and the numbers and how Ken Palm works and analytics, any of those seven teams should be your winner if you want to technically win your bracket, according to the numbers. So, and looking at them all, I don't disagree, which is crazy. I do. The big one that stands out to me is Auburn, them being a 4 seed. I think Auburn could make a sneaky run for sure. Bruce Pearl's a great coach. They have a great system down there in Auburn. I know you hate them because you're an Alabama guy, which I totally get, but just
You
they're
have to.
solid.
It's
So
required.
I would not be surprised to see Auburn make a run. And looking at where they're at, I gotta find them on the bracket, but they play Yale round one.
They're up in yeah, they're in UConn's in
Oh,
the
they are,
East.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, if they beat Yale round one, then they're going to either play San Diego State or UAB. I mean, it looks like they have a decent until they get later into the bracket. They have a pretty pedestrian matchup. It seems
Yeah, I think the Sweet 16 will be their
that's going to
toughest
be
challenge because that's where they'll face
that's
UConn,
going to be the
and
region
that'll
to
be
watch once we get later in the tournament. Is that East region, because there's a lot of heavy hitters that are going to collide, and man, it's going to be a sight to see for sure. Um, I'm going to ask
yeah.
you real quick.
I'm
What do
excited.
you
I'm
think is
excited.
going to be your big day one? I guess round one, between the first 2 days. I guess, what do you think is going to be the shocker upset that nobody picked?
Ooh. Round one shocker upset. I could potentially see. Well, we talked about the Vermont Duke. That's a
Yep.
potential, um, which I could see happening. We talked about the Oregon and South Carolina, which I
Hmm.
liked, 11 over
Hmm.
6. I think when we talk about a shocker upset that nobody sees, you even have to go probably beyond that, right? It has to be a 13 or 14 maybe or
Hmm.
higher to be a real shocker at this point.
Hmm.
Um, looking at the bracket, I think a lot of people even I don't think it'd be a shocker if Samford beat Kansas, so I don't want to go there, even though they are a 13 over a 4. Um, I think a shocker would be like a maybe a Moorhead State over Illinois, something like that would be a crazy. I mean, just a crazy shocker. I don't think anyone would
A
call.
lot of people
In fact,
like them, which is crazy.
I could look at right now, according to the matchup analysis on CBS, which I've pulled up, 93% user pick on Illinois, just 7% on Morehead State. So and when you look at strength of schedule, Illinois is a 22nd versus 264th. So when you look at those type of stats, however, the crazy thing is when you look at team statistics, and of course we just talked about strength of schedule, so it's a little bit different. But in field goal percentage, according to the team statistics, Morehead State's 53rd, Illinois 49th, so close there. On 3-point field goal percentage, we got 125th for Illinois and 60th for Morehead. So if they get hot from behind the arc, you never know. Could happen.
I know. That was the one I was going to talk about. Is I've heard a lot of people as well being like Morehead State's going to be this team that they're going to be the Cinderella team, and I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I'm just ready. I'm ready for the games to start. To be honest with you, I'm ready. I'm ready to see my Bobcats hopefully put a whooping on Grambling State and have us have our third straight, actual tournament appearance. But the other big, and this is going to grind your gears, but the other big matchup that I think could be a little sneaky is that 13-4 in Charleston and your Alabama Crimson Tide. Um,
Alabama's streaky, dude. It could
I
happen.
know. Well,
that
in
doesn't.
Alabama,
That would not surprise
I
me.
bet on Alabama to cover a 5-point spread early in the year at Tennessee, and they lost by 25. And then the next time I bet against Alabama in one of their games, they blew my bet out of the water and smoked me. So Alabama has been on my do not bet list the entire college basketball season, and because of that, I'm like kind of leaning towards maybe I take them. But of course, the one time I'll again fade Alabama. I wish I didn't have to pick that matchup because whatever I pick is going to go the other way. So you maybe should give me a call.
Oh well, then pick Charleston for
Yeah,
me.
I was gonna say, give me a call at 9:45 tomorrow morning, right before the games start, and I'll let you know who I took, and just fade me because I guarantee you that's what's gonna happen. And God, so I don't know
Perfect,
why your Crimson Tide have been the bane of my existence this year betting, but they just have been, and I hate it because they're a solid team.
dude. The Crimson Tide are the bane of my existence at all.
Oh,
Just in betting, in just all the time. Even especially lately, even in football, we had so many years where you could just bet them to
oh,
win by 30, and it was great. And then all of a sudden we're like other teams, and it's not as fun.
yeah, I'm excited to talk college football with you later this year. It's gonna be a wild landscape coming into the next season.
Well, we got the draft
We
coming
do.
up. We got some interesting stuff with the draft coming up. Some real good prospects and where they'll end up. So that may be something we have to touch on next week.
100%.
In fact, because it's coming up fast, man.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great time of year. NBA playoffs are about to start. NHL playoffs are about to start. Masters are in like 3 weeks. It's crazy, man.
Yeah, NBA's got their play-in tournament, and then their playoffs officially start the
Yeah.
20th. I
No, it's
think
crazy,
April
man.
20th.
It's gonna
So
be it's best time of the year, man. Best time of the year.
hell yeah! All right, brother. Well, anything else to add before we head out of here?
I said it earlier.
Other
I'll
than
say it again. Just fill out a bracket. Just do it. It's so fun. And even
just
if
do it.
everybody
Yeah.
else is gonna do it, and I hate to be like, the peer pressure, but everyone else is doing it. And when everyone else at a party or a get together that you have with your friends is watching these games and is yelling at the TV because they picked some crazy upset or whatever, and you're the only one that's not doing that, it's going to not be that fun for you. So at least fill it out, and you can at least have a little bit of a talking point if you do get into that sticky situation if you're not a basketball person. So just fill out a bracket. Enjoy the month we have ahead. We sleep in May. It's going to be a great tournament.
Also, great thing about peer pressure is it goes away as soon as you
Yeah,
do it. So,
exactly, dude. Exactly.
so you do it and you'll be fine. But, anyways, thanks for
Yeah.
listening to the Frisky Risky podcast. Remember, follow us on social for Willie P's NBA
Mhm.
picks. He may even throw some extra stats or stuff up there for March Madness. Go join the newsletter because you get stuff from us, new articles, new um, special betting picks there as well. Also, health scores for the NBA, NFL season. And hit like, follow us, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Oh yeah.